Now, the long title of our project is Celebrating Local Stewardship in a Global Market, Community Heritage, Intellectual Property Protection and Sustainable Development in India. Now that's quite a mouthful, but first and foremost, it is because this project fundamentally is a research project. And can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. And at the core of our research project, we have three main ideas that basically set the scene for the theoretical background of some of the ideas that we are testing during this project. So we are both testing and responding to the theoretical frameworks that underpin the project, as well as developing and implementing practical, impactful outcomes. So the main ideas underpinning the project are that intangible cultural heritage management should be done by the communities and groups who practice and transmit it. So that's the first fundamental idea underpinning intangible cultural heritage. The second idea is that commercialization of products produced through ICH processes can promote sustainable development and benefit the community. So we do support the idea of commercialization of intangible heritage for the purposes of sustainable development. But we do know and appreciate, the idea that there are, or at least the fact that there are risks associated with commercialization. So mitigations have to be put into place. And it's some of these mitigations that we are investigating in the project. And the third idea is that the two main areas that we're looking at, that of whom we have specialists in the research team, are intellectual property and marketing strategies can support heritage safeguarding if attention is paid to what is promoted, how and who does it. So those are the three main theoretical ideas that underpin the work that we've been doing in this research project. Next slide, please. Okay, at the core of what we've been doing is co-creation of HIPAMS, which is what we've been talking about, heritage-sensitive intellectual property and marketing strategies. And we've been co-creating these HIPAMS with 3 communities in West Bengal. And I think one of the important points is that Banglanatak had already been working with these 3 communities and their heritage, Patachicha, Purulia Cho, and Balfakiri performers. So Banglanatak had already been working with them and had helped them to develop their ICH to a point where it was helping them to make a livelihood. So at that point, these communities were then ready for some of the ideas that we were bringing and introducing to them during the course of our project. Next slide, please. HIPAMS. This is back to the idea that what we are doing, the core of what we are doing is focusing on the intangible cultural heritage. So this has absolutely been at the core of this project. It is working with the communities to identify what is important to them and then thinking about how marketing strategies can help them to find markets and how intellectual property rights can then underpin those marketing strategies. Next slide. So we've introduced what we've called the HIPAMS process, which essentially has four parts to it. First of all, there's the diagnosis phase, and then there is the strategy development. Then we have the strategy implementation, and then we have the monitoring and evaluation. And we are somewhere moving between the strategy implementation. We've developed the toolkit, which we're talking about with you today. And we will then be monitoring and evaluating the work that we've been doing with the communities over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. And in this slide, I just really wanted to re-emphasize the centrality of the communities to the work that we've been doing. So HIPAMS are co-developed with the communities. The model is used to collect to work with communities to collect the information. The communities themselves define what heritage is important to them. And then the communities members decide what proposals they would like to take forwards, and the proposals which have been worked on with the HIPAMS team. So it's very much a co-created, community-focused project. And with that, I'll move on to the next slide and pass over to Diego.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So as I introduced myself before, I'm the marketing guy in this project, and I have this challenge to try and say why heritage and commercialization can go together in the same sentence. We know we have debated a lot in the team whether we should use a commercialization or a term less likely to trigger people into thinking of the negative consequences of commercialization. We thought of having a promotion, which is more acceptable to many people, or to use sustainable development more in general, but we keep commercialization, and if we can go to the next slide, please. We kept commercialization because even though we do not want to especially trigger people, we know that we need to enter that conversation. We know that from the practical point of view and also the theoretical point of view, so much has been written and observed about the negative consequences and the risks associated with commercialization of ICH. So first, even the arena of ICH is linked to fears that the control might go outside of the communities. So turning something that was an informal practice into something that is decided or influenced or shaped by cultural experts, ministries, and so on and so forth. So within this broader set of problems, then come the market. So the market is usually considered as a corrupting force, a force that might eventually put money in the temple, so to speak, so that something that was precious for the community eventually loses meaning and loses its raison d'etre. And also there are many concerns about the fact that actors like commercial intermediaries external to the bearer communities might take advantage of the community's ICH, so exploiting for commercial gain in a way that gives pennies and cents to the communities and make profits that are funneled somewhere else. And of course, we are aware of that. And the whole point of our toolkit is find ways to avoid these, find ways to avoid these problems. And if we can go to the next stage. As Charlotte explained very well, in this toolkit, we look together at heritage, intellectual property rights, and marketing, which are normally separate kind of expertises. And sometimes when they are combined in a way that is not optimal, things can become a disaster. I'm not going to read these. The toolkit, you will have the details, but this is a case I studied in the Italian Alps of heritage bearers that have been stripped of their intellectual property rights, even though there was an instrument, a geographical indication, which is a legal instrument that has been totally abused in this case to strip some communities of their ICH to over-commercialize it, and the people, the only thing they could do was going away from the collective organization that was managing the geographical indication in order to do something else, to link themselves to an alternative commercialization network, namely the slow food movement. So the point I'm making is that over-commercialization happens. Sometimes marketing can be abused, can be too much. Sometimes even legal instruments that are right in principle can be abused. Can we go to the next slide, please? So a point I made is that a lot has been written and many people are aware of ICH, are not so are mindful of these problems, but there's also the other side of the coin. Sometimes a little bit of commercialization is useful to let the heritage survive. We know that life changes, life condition changes, culture change, and sometimes if there's not a little bit of economic incentives, there's no way to lure new generation to contribute to the livelihood of the heritage. So sometimes, and again, this is another case, a little under commercialization, so taking the market totally away from ICH can have these negative consequences, and not many people are aware of the negative consequences of under commercialization. So if we can go to the next slide. You need a little bit of both. So, and I'm not going to this example for lack of time, but from too much commercialization and not enough commercialization, there's a sort of a in-between safe zone where people in the communities, the heritage communities, remain in control, and that they have open and frank discussions on what they want to commercialize, under what conditions, and what it's better to keep private. If we go to the next slide. So sometimes, when people hear of commercialization, they say, and this is another trigger, they say that, but there's something that shouldn't be commercialized. And we totally agree with that. We totally agree that communities should commercialize everything. They have a right to leave the decisions in their hands on what should be commercialized, what should be not commercialized. And a good outcome of the HIPAM process from our perspective is that a boundary between something that should be put outside of the market is maintained. So if we go to my final slide for now. Next, please. So this is, with this toolkit, we want to have a vocabulary and be mindful to different cases, different situations. As outcome of the IPAM process, it's okay that some parts or maybe all of the ICH of a community is not commercialized at all, but if a community want to commercialize a part of that, there are ways to avoid commercialization, and there are good ways to exploit marketing and even legal protection, so that this is done in a heritage-sensitive manner. And I leave the word to Harriet. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Diego. So we've got a very impressive group of people together for this Zoom meeting, and I'm very keen that we move into our discussion quite quickly. But before we get to the first Q&A section, I'm just going to say a few words about the toolkit that I see most of you have already had a look at. The toolkit really came out of some of the results of our research that Charlotte was introducing. And we felt that it might be nice to share some of the insights that we had about planning methods. And the audience for the toolkit, we imagine it potentially being useful to certain kinds of community organizations, to NGOs and other stakeholders, people like yourselves. Our idea is that it could be freely used because obviously the experiences that we've had through this project are limited, and it's going to be necessary to maybe pick and choose what's useful to you or change and add your own insights in to make it useful in a community setting. And of course, it's not complete. I mean, it's only a drop in the ocean of the kinds of resources that you might need to help a community navigate through some of the difficulties that Diego's describing. And we felt that one of the problems was that specific expertise on intellectual property, heritage, and marketing was not that easily available. There's not much specific expertise and models out there that are linking all of those things together. Next slide, please. One of the key findings that has come out of our research is not so much to think of these separate disciplines being useful in a community planning perspective, IP, heritage, and marketing, but to think of 4 cross-cutting issues in community planning. And those cross-cutting issues we've called the HIPAMS canvas as a kind of planning tool. And the first issue is community empowerment, because we felt that one of the key factors in communities negotiating for common benefit was organization and the ways in which they manage their relationships with third parties. The second key issue is what we've called skills repertoire, not just thinking about a skill to make one traditional product, but the range of skills in the community that are maintained over time. And that links not just to skills, but to knowledge, know-how, and values. And then thirdly, this question of reputation, and it's a reputation of the heritage within the community, as well as their reputation and the knowledge that's known about them outside of the community. And that affects both the heritage management and the marketing aspects. And then the final issue is heritage sensitive innovation. We felt that there wasn't enough discussion in the heritage management field about innovation. At the same time, it was difficult to calibrate that discussion to talk about its relationship to heritage and heritage skills. So we felt that these 4 issues were some of the crucial areas that we ended up discussing in the HIPAMS process. Next slide, please. And so what we're offering in the toolkit is some of the tools that we've developed for our own purposes during the HIPAMS project. Most of them are in the diagnostics phase. Charlotte described these 4 phases of the HIPAMS process. And most of the tools that we developed are for the first phase. And after the Q&A, we'll get into some of the details of those tools. You will have seen them in the toolkit itself. I think I'll leave it there. Next slide, please, and we go to the Q&A.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Harriet and Charlotte and Diego, all of you. Shoham, can you please make it a gallery view and remove the spotlight? Yeah. So most of you have said that the communities have insufficient marketing skills. Would any one of you like to elaborate on that?
I was just going to, I guess, add, sort of add in response to Lubna's, sort of question about who or at least who should work with the toolkit, is I think the, sort of the response that, the overwhelming response that communities don't have sufficient knowledge about marketing is perhaps an indication that, an intermediary is really very important, who might have these skills, who can work with the communities, with the tools in, sort of in order to develop the strategies for the communities. And it'll be quite interesting, I think, when we ask a similar question, if we are about IP, to see, sort of the level of skills around IP as well. But, sort of as I said, that, when we were working with the communities, Balcho and Patachitra, Banglanatak had already done some work with them. So they had come up to a certain stage of development, but that was the stage when they were ready to learn about these potential tools that they could then use in order to, sort of further develop in ways they wanted their ICH for sort of to enhance their livelihoods. But it does require, I think, certainly the way we conceptualized it, a bit of an intermediary to help with, sort of planning the way that those tools will work, and also what the tools are and what's possible with them. Sort of look at IP in a little bit, and sort of the IP strategies that we'd been looking at. But I'm a lawyer. I hold my hand up and say I'm a professor of law, so I do have a law background. But I absolutely agree with you that it is a complex area. But one of the things that we have been acutely aware of during this project is things like the challenge around enforcement, and the practical, sort of realities that enforcement is just not possible. So we have, sort of suggested with the communities strategies to mitigate that, and we'll talk again a little bit about those later, which sort of are around ethical codes. Sort of rather than thinking about court as a response, an ethical code might be better. But we will come back to IP in more detail. But we did have this very much at the heart of what we were thinking about. But I think, sort of certainly from the theoretical frameworks as well, there is something about thinking about the ways in which intellectual property, as it is conceptualized and theorized, can both support marketing strategies. So, how can a geographical indication actually support the marketing that is being done? Sort of as well as potentially mitigate against some of the risks that Diego has mentioned that arise when ICH and the market meet each other.
Okay, so with this, we will move to our next session. So I request Shoham to start the presentation, and over to Diego.
Can I?
Yes, please.
No, I think it's me, actually.
Sorry.
Thanks, Ananya. So I'm going to introduce two of the diagnostic tools. Next slide, please. The first tool is what we called the Roots and Fruits tool. And it really comes out of a conversation about the fact that communities, and even perhaps NGOs that are working with communities, often don't step back from the tradition and say, okay, well, what actually is the tradition in terms of what are the skills, what is the knowledge, what are the values that we're wanting to transmit over the generations? People often take that for granted. And it's quite helpful in a diagnostic process to actually step back and identify the roots of the tradition. And what we thought of is this model of trying to link the roots of the tradition to the products and services that might be sold. It's also quite helpful, as Diego points out, to think about those kinds of things that are done. Maybe they have been sold in the past, but maybe they're not appropriate for sale. Maybe they're things that should be offered for free, or rituals that should be secret and only available to some people. So the Roots and Fruits tool can help to start navigating this balance between products and traditional roots. Next slide, please. So we used, in the toolkit, I think you will have seen, we used Bengal Patachitra as an example. And these are some of the roots and fruits that were identified with the community. I'd like to make 2 points about this. And the one is that actually it looks like a trivial exercise, but it took us and the team, in fact, working with the community, quite a few different iterations to get all of these factors on the table. I still think we probably underlisted some of the meanings and values in the roots section. So this is probably an ongoing process with any community. And equally with the fruits, often communities think about products and they don't think about services in the fruit section. So now in the Patachitra community, people are starting to sell online training and so on. And obviously that's also a product and a service that can be sold. And workshop tours and so on might also be listed as products. Next slide, please. The second tool is what we call a heritage skills mapping tool. And this is linked to the idea you saw in the canvas of the heritage skills repertoire. The idea about a skills mapping tool is just to see what the viability is of all the different skills in the community. So maybe if there's only one person left who can do a particular kind of skill, then maybe that's something to take account of and be concerned about for the future. At the same time, it takes the emphasis away from this focus on everybody needing to make traditional products, only traditional products, which sometimes in the heritage management field, there's too much focus on, everybody being trained to only make traditional products. We have, next slide please, we have suggested the possibility of maybe using a spider graph like on the left-hand side, where you go around the community and see how many artists have got different skills. And then you can use that to strategize about what needs to be done. Next slide, please. I think one of the things that we're very conscious of, and I think Shubha mentioned that in her comments on the toolkit as well, that focusing only on one or two products and not on context is not optimal. I'm not such a fan of the one village, one product model. And of course, heritage is linked. Communities have lots of different traditional skills and knowledge that are interrelated with each other, and all of it's linked into their context. So what we don't really see the use of these tools as, it's not optimal to focus too much on only one tradition to the exclusion of all others. And so we see it as important to consider the orchard and not just the single tree, and how that all of those things relate to each other. I think I'll hand now to Diego.
Thank you very much, Harriet. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So in marketing, reputation is a big part of what companies want to do. So marketing has created a jargon, a series of terms that are very useful to make sense of reputation. And so, these were integrated in the toolkit to analyze the reputation of a particular ICH form. So the questions, then I will speak about the methods to answer this question, but the question one should be asked, whether it's Bengali Patachitra or a Chow dance or any other forms that you mentioned, is how on average society as large and the market are aware of this heritage. So think of your perspective of your communities. Is the market and society very aware of or not at all? Because your marketing and legal for intellectual property right problems will be completely different if it's no awareness or if it's very well known with a lot of awareness. Even in a situation where a community and its practitioner are very well known, the knowledge of the market, so external stakeholders and consumers and intermediaries have of the tradition, it may differ a lot. It may be completely different. So sometimes awareness is just being aware of the name of the ICH, but knowing all the culture, the context, and why it's important to the people, it's a completely different and deeper level of knowledge. And again, marketing can do a lot, and a lot of problem of misrepresentation can be addressed with promotion to educate the market about why this is important. And knowledge sometimes can be linked to storytelling approaches. So knowing how much the market knows is important because as an exercise you want to compare, and again, this goes back to the community. What would the community want to be known about their heritage to external people, consumer, tourists, etc. So you need to compare the two. And very often there's no way the external consumer who are distracted know about that. So you need to invest in that part. And finally, the evaluation. The evaluation is, does the market and society thinks that this heritage is valuable for society as a whole or not? So there are some situations, if you're lucky, when there's a lot of goodwill towards the heritage. Sometimes people do not care. And again, marketing can do a lot to switch even evaluation. So to increase awareness, to improve the knowledge, and to create a more positive evaluation. And if we can go to the next stage, how can you do that? So in the toolkit, we decided we are not going to make a market research or reputation analysis research textbook from scratch because the knowledge is up there. But we want to make that very often today, just by Googling or by looking at Instagram on the right hashtag, you can understand a lot. You can understand a lot of the awareness of your ICH and what the market on average know about your ICH, and also who dominates the conversation. It's people maybe in the rural part of the country where the bearer community lives, or it's intermediaries in big cities, or it's NGOs in big cities. So looking already, just Googling, you can do some sensitive content analysis, you can understand who's speaking for the ICH. Sometimes and very often it's not the community themselves. The other point is that qualitative interviews that can be formal or can be informal interviews. For example, you ask a customer arrives, a tourist arrives to a festival, you ask them, what do you know about our heritage? What is your motivation for coming here? Even qualitative informal interviews to anybody who is relevant, from consumers, distributors, other stakeholders, can do a lot. And the communities already know a lot of their market and their reputation. So you can do some brainstorming exercise to develop a lot of knowledge on this point, okay? So the key point is that reputation is very important because the bigger the reputation, the bigger the market is, and more importantly, people will be willing to pay more for heritage with a stronger reputation. And this can make the difference between survival or not survival. If we can go to the next stage. So we put it in a progression. These are three typical situations, but it doesn't need to be like that. So sometimes an ICH and these communities are in a state of a low awareness. So they have a completely different marketing and IC intellectual property right problems respected to a situation of high awareness and a favorable image. Okay, at the beginning, you have to build your reputation. It can take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 1 century, okay? So if you start from scratch, you need investment in marketing and promotion, and otherwise it will not work. It will not happen out of luck. And in this case, you might need NGO support, you may need state support, and you can use intellectual property rights, but in this moment you do not have the usual problem of misappropriation and misrepresentation because there's so limited awareness that nobody cares. So it's not a problem that you face in this moment. On the other hand, if you are in a situation of high awareness and favorable image, you need to invest less in marketing because the reputation is already there. You may look at penetrating your market to expand, but you have a good base. And it is very important, not only the legal protection, which probably you already have, whether it's individual or collective, but enforcement is much more important because you have a lot of problems of misappropriation and misrepresentation. And then in between, you can have cases of limited knowledge or unfavorable image or misrepresentation. And again, here you need, depending on the situation, a mix of intellectual property and marketing strategies. So the point I'm making with this slide is that you need to carry out market research on your reputation, on your image problems, and then you need to devise a strategy integrating marketing and IP rights, depending on the situation where you are, because the strategy for high awareness and favorable image is completely different than the strategy in the case of low awareness or in the case of some awareness but with an unfavorable image. And can we go to the next slide, please? So this is a complex slide, and it's an instrument that it's two different parts of our toolkit combined together. On the left hand, there's this idea that the market is made of people, whether it's local people, consumers from big cities, tourists that come to a festival, and they are not the same. Sometimes we think the market is this homogeneous force that corrupts heritage. It's not, it's made of people, and you have good people, good customers, and bad customers. Those who want cheap products and are not interested in your heritage, you don't want them. Don't even make any products for these people, increase the price. You don't want to have nothing to do with these people. But then you might want to focus on the right consumers who need to be nurtured, to be educated about the heritage, and they will be willing to pay the full price. So on the left side, you have the idea that customer groups are all different and they want different things. On the right side, when you look at products, you want to think your product portfolio. Products are a physical manifestation of the ICH, and you want to design, but to use your heritage skills, those Harriet was talking about, to design a different kind of products, so maybe products that integrate everything, you know, all the heritage skill repertoires, and some a little less, to have a market share. And this should be done after a strategy based on knowledge of the market and knowledge of what the community wants. Otherwise, it's not heritage sensitive and can be dysfunctional. Okay, I think it's my last slide, and I head over to Benedetta.
Yes, so I'm going to talk about legal protection a bit, and I noticed that some of you already raised the difficulties of associating legal protections to ICH. So to mitigate a bit those difficulties, it is very important to raise a number of questions which should be asked to the communities, of course, before considering appropriate legal protections. So for instance, how does the community of artists generally like to share or keep private their knowledge or works? Is there a community organization? What does it represent? What does it do? What is its legal status in the country? What intellectual property rights, if any, do the community or the artists already enjoy? Have they, for instance, registered trademarks? Have they geographical indications? We will going to talk about those two collective intellectual property rights in the next slides. Are the products, if we are talking about the products or the services, registered under any labeling scheme, like for instance, Craftmark or Mountain Products or bio labeling scheme? And I remind you that labeling scheme are not intellectual property rights. Next slide, please. So let's talk about intellectual property rights a little bit. Let's start from collective intellectual property rights, such as geographical indication. Some of you already mentioned this kind of protection for the communities that constitute an intellectual property right. So what is a geographical indication? A geographical indication is an intellectual property right, which is constituted by a name or a symbol, which identifies that goods or services originate and are manufactured, namely goods in this case, in the territory of a country or a region or a locality in that territory, where a given quality, reputation, or other characteristic of such goods is essentially attributable to its geographical origin. How can you show that your goods have a geographical indication? By using a geographical indication logo. Where can you put your logo? A geographical indication logo can be placed, for instance, on the product's packaging, or near the product themselves, or on your business card, or on your website, or videos, or social media, Facebook pages, whatever, Instagram. What kind of logo can you use? A logo specific to your goods, such as, for instance, example is represented here of a specific GI logo, which is Bengal Patachitra GI logo. And that logo can be combined with another logo representing geographical indications in India, which is All India Geographical Indication logo. So here we start noticing that two logos can be associated on the same product, and that both logos correspond to an intellectual property right, which is of a collective nature. So it is property, but is collective property. In the case of All India, the property belongs to the government, the entire government, so a collective entity, of course. Next slide, please. Another collective intellectual property right can be a non-registered, so a non-registered collective trademark. So what is an unregistered collective trademark? It is a trademark, and the trademark is a mark that can be represented graphically and which can distinguish the goods or services of one person from those of others. Most trademarks are, once again, logos or names. A collective trademark is something that is collective, so property that is collective. So it exists where the members of an entire association are the owners of the trademark, and they can decide how it should be used by members. Here we have a collective trademark that is unregistered. So this trademark has not been registered, but is a trademark. So for instance, here you have an example. The Chitrataru logo is an example of an unregistered collective trademark, and it belongs to a collective entity, which is the Chitrataru Association of Patachitra Artists in Naya, Where can you use such logo? Once again, on letters, the association's website, members' products, packaging, depending on what rules they decide as a collective association. Next slide, please. Here we have some examples of individual property. So we pass from collective property to individual property, and then we have a specific intellectual property rights, which is a copyright. What is a copyright? Copyright is the exclusive right to do or authorize the doing of certain acts in respect of a work. Which work? It can be original, literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works. Who holds the copyright? In the case of a painting, for instance, the artist who painted the product, the creation, will normally be the holder of the copyright. Next slide, please. Another individual intellectual property right is performance right. What is a performance and who is a performer? A performance is any visual or acoustic presentation made live by one or more performers. So performers can be actors, singers, musicians, dancers, acrobats. So whoever delivers a lecture, for instance, or whoever makes a performance. Then what is a performer's right? Once again, it is an individual intellectual property right that consists in the right to do or authorize others to make a sound recording or a visual recording of the performance, broadcast or communicate the performance to the public, except where the performance is already broadcast. And also the right to claim to be identified as the performer of their performance, to be credited. Next slide, please. So intellectual property rights of a collective or an individual nature can be joined to offer protection to communities and support marketing strategies. So for instance, here you can see multiple intellectual property rights implemented on the same intellectual creation. So let's take, for instance, a Patachitra artist intellectual creation, such as Anbar Chitrakar, for instance. This creation could simultaneously benefit from the protection of the following intellectual property rights, at least, okay? First of all, geographical indication. So the geographical indication logo could be associated with the creation. Collective trademark, the collective trademark logo could be associated with the creation. An unregistered individual trademark, such as the name, because a trademark is, we didn't say this, we say it now, a device, brand, heading, label, ticket, name, signature. Okay, so this is a trademark, non-registered trademark. And besides that, also copyright. Of course, there is a copyright in this creation. So you see at least 4 intellectual property rights associated to this creation, at least. Next slide, please. Here you see the tables that we used during the HIPAMS project and that we are using, of course. I'm not going to enter too much into the details because those are very complex tables, but you may just want to focus on the 2 last column which refer to possible benefits for the community of associating a certain intellectual property rights to their creations, heritage creations, but also possible risks. Okay, so intellectual property rights require a very deep strategy that should be developed together with the communities, because they are capable of bringing benefits to the community, but at the same time bringing risks. So our project examines both benefits and risks, and the aim of associating intellectual property rights to a traditional art work and creation has to be in support of marketing strategies. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so as Harriet, Diego, and Benedetta have explained the tools developed in this project, I now briefly explain how the community participated in this HIPAMS project and what was the context and how we started. Next slide. We already discussed the communities we are working with. So in the beginning, members of the banglanatok.com visited the artist villages, discussed the project objectives, the methods with the communities. This is around June 2018. And apart from sharing the general information, we signed consent forms as part of ethical guidelines from the Copenhagen University. The artists signed and who actively participate in this project. After that, a HIPAMS team consulted with the community members in December 2018 to understand the art forms, process, materials, and diagonals, the problems the community faced, and understand the context. Here you see that Benedetta is observing a traditional scroll. It is in Pingla. So after that, the HIPAMS team discussed among themselves to plan the strategies, drawing insights from different sectors, heritage, marketing, and IP, and proposed strategies with the community members in the workshops in September 2019. After that, that consultation, strategies are revised and taken to the field for implementation, which is still on. Next slide. So now I briefly share the context and experiences of our working with, particularly with the Potuas from Pingla. So largely you can see the slides, largely they have the traditional skill to paint the long scrolls. They are also experimenting with kettles and other diversified products. The young artists have less skill of composing and singing songs. Potuas largely sell to city dwellers, also the local buyers, the villagers, and also some international art lovers. Some of the famous Potuas have linkage with the galleries, with the curators, some like Sorno Chitrokar, you will see her performance here. I mean, Sorno has gone to more than 10 countries all over the world. So some are such famous artists, and some Potuas' work are exhibited in Victoria Albert, in Freer Sackler, in Philadelphia Museum of Art, and also in the Smithsonian. Okay, the next slide, please. So we know that Potuas have a collective organization called Chitrodoru, but at the moment we started the work, Chitrodoru was not doing much about the collective marketing, and very few artists have their own social media pages. And income is largely seasonal during the festival time, which is winter, and most artists can sell their product during the Potomaya festival held in Pingla, the artist villages. There was a demand of better packaging actually. Artists were experimented with different kind of approaches, but at that point, nothing sustained as such. And some people, I mean, take their photos, posted on the social medias, but they never attribute the name of the artist and the villages. Potuas are happy with that, but they want that their names at least mentioned in the posts. Potuas freely share their designs among themselves, but they feel that it is unfair when galleries ask the Potuas to copy other Potuas' work. So there was a concern among them. And now that is a brief context when we started work in Pingla, for an example. So now in the next slides, we will see how the people participated, and I will request Mousumi Choudhury, who is a very young chow dancer, accomplished, and who will share her story. Okay, over to Moshumi.
Shoham, I think you unshare the screen for some time here. Moshumi, unmute korte hobe. Please unmute.
Yeah, I am Moshumi Chaudhary from Purulia, West Bengal, India. I am a show dancer. In 2019, a film titled Jabardakhl on women show dancers was released. My dance group and I performed in the movie with our mask on. But the role of lead show dancer when the mask was removed was played by another actress. In the film credits, the name of my dance group or my name was not mentioned. I was very happy to about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Moshumi. Shoham, please share the screen again.
That was wonderful, Moshumi. Thank you so much. And this this slide shows gives a wonderful, lovely picture of Moshumi in her costume, and gives a little bit more detail about Moshumi's story. But listening to it from Moshumi is directly is wonderful. So thank you for that. One of the things that we did, obviously, that Rajat has also explained when we spoke to the communities, was to listen to their concerns. What sort of what had happened during their interactions with people that had worried them, that they hadn't really felt that they'd been able to do anything about, and were we able to do anything about this? Could we address this in any way? And of course, the issue for Moshumi really was that she had not been credited for her role in this film. And there is a right for performers to be named as performers, but it's not easy for somebody to address, sort of somebody in Moshumi's position to speak to a large film company and say, actually, I would like my name to appear in the credits, please. So what we did was to address this and other issues was to develop codes of ethics. And could we have the next slide, please? And what we did, we've developed codes of ethics for each of the communities that we have been working with. And what these aim to do is to highlight some of the rights, some of the legal rights that the communities have, such as the right to be attributed. And if they have an artistic work, then this should not be copied without permission. That arises from the law of copyright. And if there is a geographical indication associated with the work, then this should be used and used properly. So what it does is to highlight these rights that collectively and individually the community has. But also it sets it more broadly within the context of intangible cultural heritage. So what it also asks the people to whom it's addressed is to promote respect and awareness of the tradition of the artists. These codes are addressed to the stakeholders, the organizations that the communities deal with, such as performance organizers. In the case of Moshumi, it is film makers. In the case of some of the Patachitra artists, it will be publishers. So, as I say, what they aim to do is to highlight some of the rights that the communities and the members of the community have, and to address and to highlight these with the stakeholders, to draw attention to how the communities and the members would like to be treated. And it's all in the interests of ensuring both the survival of the intangible cultural heritage and of the communities. So if we go on to the next slide, Swarma Chitrakra painted a Patachitra scroll describing the intellectual property rights after we'd done training with the community. She painted the scroll describing some of the intellectual property rights that pertain to the community.
So you heard, how they have translated the inherent message and the learning of the project. Shoham, maybe we can go back to the screen. Over to Charlotte.
Swana, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I think it's for the HIPAMS team, having a scroll that was painted and a song that reflects some of the work that we did together is just amazing. So thank you. That was such a lovely performance. But I think what it does for the, sort of for the discussion we're having as well, is reflect beautifully the place of the codes of ethics that we have been developing with the communities, that it is very difficult to talk to these researchers and the filmmakers individually about about respect for the communities and for their heritage and what the rights are. So dissemination of these codes will hopefully encourage all these stakeholders to respect the communities and enable co-working amongst all these people to ensure that the ICH continues into the future and that the communities can make their livelihoods from their ICH. And if we can just go on to the next slide, please. One of the pictures in the scroll denoted people coming to take photographs. And of course, there are lots of visitors, quite apart from formal filmmakers and researchers, lots of visitors who come to the village during the festivals and take photographs of the community members. They take photographs of their work, their artwork. And what these visitors do, of course, is to share these pictures online. Now, this is something that the community would like. In discussion with the community would really like to encourage this sharing, because it not only spreads the information about the community and about their work, and so it spreads the information, but they would like people, the visitors, to do this with respect, because they are taking photographs not only of the people, but also of the artwork. So what the community said that they would do would be to give the visitors permission to photograph, permission to put these photographs on their social media channels, permission for other people to copy them, so long as they do it and they don't make money out of it, so long as they attribute the village, so long as they name the artists. And as part of the social media training, we also talked a lot about hashtags, and so they would also like hashtags to be used as well. So it is respect. It is saying, yes, of course, please do disseminate information, but please respect us, respect our heritage. So these are some of the ways in which we have addressed some of the community concerns, bringing together intellectual property and marketing, but absolutely staying focused on the heritage, sensitive, intangible heritage. And on to the next slide, please. And I think here, yeah, we're on to Diego.
So, to me, this point, part of the HIPAMS intervention was to train people to become more mindful and aware. I think it's the previous slide, thank you, of not only their intellectual property right, individual and collective, but also of their possibilities to use social media for collective and individual marketing purposes. Why social media? Social media are not so expensive, and many people, particularly the younger generation, have smartphones, so it's easy to take pictures and to download, to upload there in their individual Instagram accounts or Facebook pages and so on and so forth. And it is very important. One of the first questions was, is it this toolkit for NGO, for communities? It can be for the communities, can be also for the individual artist. And we saw that sometimes when it's NGOs, particularly for big cities, who do what I call the vicarious marketing. So they promote the artist for themselves, so they try to understand what is best for the artist, and it comes from a very good place, this intention. But sometimes it's better to give the power to artists to do their own promotion, to use the social media to create direct links to consumers. And this is why we trained the artist both on the technical, on the aesthetics, but also on the storytelling ways to put online, to be online in a way that is mindful of their heritage and is mindful also of their intellectual property right. And this can be done at the individual level, so all the artists, particularly the younger one, are doing that, but it can be done also at the collective level. For in the case of Naya, there's this association, Chitrataru, and the association now has a website when people can learn about the heritage and its cultural value. If we can go to the next slide. So another of the intervention, and again, social media are very instrumental to that. Sometimes when you have artists like the wonderful Swarna, who are there to explain the heritage, for example, during a festival or during, I don't know, the tourists that come to Naya village, it is incredible because they have a chance to explain the heritage, they have a chance to sing the songs. But sometimes when you find a product that is far removed from the artist who made it, it is really decontextualized, which is one of the problems of commercialization of ICH. So in order to reduce the decontextualization, we took advantage of the internet and social media, and now there's an online possibility to link again the product to the artist, the product to the story that is being told in the story. And this can be done for a lot of art form. In the case of Naya village and the Bengali Chitraka tradition, we use that with packaging. So packaging now has a QR code that links to the story, to the song, which is translating in different languages. Language barriers are an issue, so sometimes if it's in Hindi, if it's in English, many more people can access the ICH, which is behind the product. And this has a lot of advantages, both from the safeguarding and promotion of ICH, but also in terms of consumer willingness to buy a product, because it's not a souvenir found in a shop, but it's a lively expression of a rich cultural treasure that they can access to. And I think I will give word to Anindita, if I'm not wrong.
In fact, while the poll is going on, I'd like to share one example where Diego really helped us. He was sharing with you all that how you can use Google search and, the followership. So what we realized that, when we type in Chow, it shows Mayurbhanj Chow sites more. Though in the images in Insta, you see the masks. Or when you type in Patachitra and do a search, it shows Odisha Patachitra more than Bengal Patachitra. So that really helped us to understand that when we want to promote the masked Chow dance or the Bengal scroll painting Patachitra, we have to, in the hashtags, we have to train our artists to use those hashtags, to improve the searches. So these were some of the interesting aspects we learned. So I think the poll is now more or less over, and we find that most of you have not been using any IP tool. So we'll take it forward from here. Diego, would you like to comment?
Comment on the poll or comment on what you said?
Yeah, because we have some time before we start to go to the next session. We are running ahead. We'll read it fast. So if you want to add on some of the points, what I shared from your research, that how Patachitra and show, I think that was a very vital learning.
I thank you very much, Ananya, and I was stressed with time, but again, this is interesting because sometimes it's it's the point I made before, who dominates the conversation. So sometimes in the case of Patachitra in India, for example, there are different kinds of Patachitra. So if one looks for just Patachitra and doesn't really know that there's a Bengal Patachitra that is different from other kind of Patachitra, the artists from Naya village are not really found. So it's important to be found, not because it's important to be there, it's important to be part of the conversation. And with social media, with this training, sometimes it's just asking people who take pictures and post them on Instagram to use hashtag Bengal Patachitra or hashtag Naya Village. Or sometimes it's there are different kind of chow dance and masks, so it's important that you use hashtag Purulia Chow or Purulia Chow masks. And so you are found, and this can provide, this means that the huge amount of images that are generated by tourists and consumers are linked back to the artist, and so the consumers and the market can do the promotion for the consumers. Okay, so this is for the artist. I mean, so this is a way that it can be sort of win-win. When you look at from a legal perspective, the fact that people take pictures, you say, oh my God, this is infringement of intellectual property, right? They shouldn't. But if you look at that from this marketing perspective, they are doing their own, they are helping the artist to do marketing. So if the artist is one alone, but you have 10 customers who are satisfied and they like the products so much and they take pictures, it's wasted if these people are not linking back to the artist. So in marketing is user-generated content. If you are a Coca-Cola, you want user-generated content. If you are Macintosh and Apple, you want user-generated content. And also, if you are an artist in our communities, you want to user-generated content because it's free advertising that it's not exempt from risks, but it can increase the awareness and improve on the reputation.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, so now I think Uttam has been one of the artists who has been very active.
अब मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा क्योंकि मुझे मालूम नहीं था जो लॉकडाउन में कुछ आएगा काम, क्योंकि रजतदान मुझे एक बार फोन करके पूछा था जो काम काज क्या चल रहा है, तो मैं बोला था कुछ भी नहीं, सब घर में बैठा हुआ वही लॉकडाउन पे। तो रजतदान ने मुझे कहा था जे देखो ये ऑनलाइन सोशल मीडिया में इस तरह का तुम्हारा जो फोटो है, जो काम है वो सोशल मीडिया पे छोड़ सकते हो, क्योंकि उसमें से ऑनलाइन में कुछ काम हो सकता है। तो अच्छा प्रपोजल दिया था हमें, तो रजतदा को फ्लॉ करके मैंने वो बनाया। हमारा जो पेंटिंग है वो हमारे साथ एक साथ अपलोड करके सोशल मीडिया पर मैंने छोड़ा है। तो उसके बाद मुझे दिल्ली से 2 वर्कशॉप किया है, मैंने किया है दिल्ली में, और कोलकाता गवर्नमेंट आर्ट कॉलेज, वहाँ का प्रोफेसर हमें फोन किया था, हमारा काम बहुत अच्छा लगा उनको, तो उन्होंने भी हमें फोन करके बताया जो आपको वर्कशॉप करवाऊंगा। तो और 2 ऑनलाइन वर्कशॉप 19-20 तारीख को अभी होने वाला है, तो बहुत ही मुझे अच्छा लग रहा है।
Thank you, Uttam. Over to Anindita.
Can I have the next slide? Yes. Then, yes, this one. Thank you, Shom. So now I'm going to share how packaging is an important component in awareness building and marketing of crafts. And I'll share the example of the Potuas and Potachitra of Pingla in this regard. So the Potachitra artists used old newspaper to wrap their products while selling their products. And they have been doing this since ages. So one of our HIPAMS team members, when he visited the village last year, and he bought a lot of products for his family back in Europe, he suggested that beautiful packaging will complement the beauty and value of the Potachitra product. And the Potuas agreed, and they worked on creating innovative packaging for their products. They held a workshop. They came up with beautiful motifs to be put on the boxes. So they have come up with completely eco-friendly packaging boxes, which in different shapes to hold different types of products like saris, their utensils and stationery. So they have boxes in different shapes and sizes with traditional motifs that they use in their paintings, like fish and birds and flowers. So this Potachitra packaging has now become very travel friendly, as well as is like an excellent gift option with the packaging. And not only that, the most interesting part I feel is the information about the art form that is available on the packaging. So one who buys a Potachitra product can now have all the information regarding the art form on the packaging. So the packaging has information like what is Potachitra, who are the Potuas, where is the product made, details of the artist collective, which is Chitratoru, and the geographical indication logo is also printed, which helps the customer to be sure about the authenticity of the product. Now, the Potachitra product also comes with a small tag which has the QR code. And this QR code leads the customer directly to the website which has the potted Gan. So the songs are an important aspect of the Potachitra. So when someone is buying the product, he or she is not getting the song. He's only getting a part of the product, which is the painting. So the QR code will lead the customer directly to the website where he or she can go through the performance, and this adds value, as Potachitra is just not about the painting, and the song is of equal importance from a heritage perspective. Not only Potachitra, the show mask makers have also come up with their innovative packaging. At the end of this session, we'll hear their feedback, the feedback of the show artists. And so we are seeing that designing the boxes has strengthened the artists' because the boxes were designed by the artists, right? And has given them a sense of ownership over the art form. Heritage sensitive packaging for traditional items can be a game changer in terms of awareness building and marketing. Heritage sensitive packaging will not only help the artists to attract customers, but also to expand their market, and also to create awareness about the art form, enable them to charge more appropriate prices for high quality handmade goods that are rooted in regional heritage. So when the product comes with a beautiful packaging, the value increases, and simultaneously they can charge like more price for the product. And I would like to end by saying that packaging is a silent salesman. So the packaging does all the talking, and this beautiful packaging can help rebrand the product, the craft product. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll see how Sharna Chitrakar used a digital platform to reach out with her art form in this pandemic era. We would like to call her to share her experience. Sharnadi, তুমি যদি একটু বলো তোমার কোনা পট কিভাবে মানুষের কাছে পৌঁছে গেছে সেটা নিয়ে।
আনমিউট শর্মা, আনমিউট। উত্তম একটু হেল্প করো, আনমিউট।
বানিয়ে তো আমরা হয়তো আমি ফেসবুক করতে পারি না, তো আমি বানিয়ে মানসদাকে পাঠিয়ে দিয়েছিলাম, তো মানসদা ফেসবুক করে দিয়েছিল, তো আমার পটটা আর আমার পটের গানটা নাকি 1 কোটিরও বেশি মানুষ দেখেছে, শুনেছে, আর কি লাইক বলে লাইক করেছে।
So I would like to add here that she said that she has already painted. She always paints on the current issues that's happening. She's painted on 9/11, tsunami, and after she painted the pot on Corona, she was skeptical about how to take it to the people, or people aren't coming to her village anymore. So how is she going to show it to the people? So she is not very well versed with social media. So her daughter helped her with it, and her video has received millions of views and likes. And a lot of newspaper and news channels interviewed her because of that. She became an internet sensation overnight. And she received a huge order from Tara Books, who came to know about her work through this post on the internet about her Corona painting. And she's received an order where she will be commissioning 100 paintings to make a book on the Potachitro, like painting Potachitro, to do a book on Corona and the pandemic. So this is how social media has helped her to get orders during this difficult times.
In fact, that is another interesting fruit. If we go back to the roots and fruits of, how digital media helps in new pathways of income. So Girish, will now listen from Girish. Girish, একটু তোমার এক্সপেরিয়েন্স বলো, একটু আনমিউট করতে হবে, আর তুমি হিন্দিতে বলতে পারলে হিন্দিতে বলো, নইলে বাংলায় বলো।
আনমিউট করো।
জয় গুরু। জয়
গুরু সকলকে। আমি তো বাউল গান অনেকদিন ধরে করছি, কিন্তু এই যে ফেসবুক লাইভ করা এবং ফেসবুকে যে আপডেট দেওয়া এবং মানুষের কাছে যে পৌঁছানোর যে রাস্তাটা, সেটা আমরা জানতাম না। বাংলানাটক.com থেকে আমরা এটা আমরা পেয়েছি এবং শিখেছি, এবং আমাদের ভালো রাস্তা, আমাদের চলার পথটা যে আমরা কিভাবে এগোতে পারবো সেই জায়গাটা আমাদের কিন্তু পৌঁছে দিয়েছে বাংলানাটক.com। এখন আমরা মোটামুটি এই লকডাউনের মধ্যেও আমরা 2-3টে প্রোগ্রাম করেছি। প্রোগ্রামের বাজারটা একটু কম, কিন্তু আমরা যে এই ফেসবুকের মাধ্যমে যে মানুষের কাছে পৌঁছে যাওয়া, সেটা কিন্তু আমাদের এই বাংলানাটক.com থেকে। জয় গুরু, জয় গুরু।
So what Girish is saying, that number of programs is now zero because of the lockdown, but they are now earning through these Facebook live performances. So this is something which is really helping them. Okay.
So Shoham, please show the.
So we have online or no? We have another online poll. So we would really like to know from you that whether the communities you work with, they have been using social media at all or regularly. Shoham, show the poll, please. So this is interesting that most of your artists are also using social media, which is very good. Okay, now over to Rajat. Shams, show the screen, please.
So now we can show some light on the impact on the community, although this is very early, but we will share some of the findings. So first of all, we have seen that artists are now more aware about their rights. They are aware about their benefit sharing acknowledgements. They come up with the code of ethics you have already seen. And the other thing, like people should ask them before recording video or photo, their permission is needed, their understanding. And here I request Girish to share his story. Girish, তোমার বইতে যে তোমার ছবি ছাপা হয়েছিল সেটা নিয়ে একটুখানি বলো।
বইটা আমার আপনার শুধু বইটাই নয়, বিসলারি কোম্পানিতেও দেওয়া ছিল আমার ছবিটা, এবং রায়ো মার্টিন থেকে যে ক্লাস 6 এর বইয়ে আমার ছবিটা দেওয়া ছিল। আমি সে বইটিও কাছে রেখেছি, বইটা আমি দেখাচ্ছি। আর বইটা আর যেটা হচ্ছে যে আমি ছবিটা তো বহু জায়গায় দেখেছি আমার অ্যাড দেওয়া, আমি প্রোগ্রামে যাইনি, সেই প্রোগ্রামে গিয়ে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে আমার ছবিটাই লাগানো আছে, অন্যজন প্রোগ্রাম করছে। হ্যাঁ, এইবার আমি কি করে ওদের কাছে বলবো সেটা আমি ভেবে কুল পাইনি। হ্যাঁ, সেটা
বইটা একটু দেখাও।
হ্যাঁ, বইটা দেখাচ্ছি। বইটা দাও একটু। আর বইটা এই যে বইটা এই যে।
So this is the book where Girish's picture is published. This is a Bengali reference book, and Girish is not aware about the fact. And actually Girish brought the notice of our team actually that this is happening. So such kind of, I mean, they incrementally they are becoming aware of their rights and all the things. আর গিরিশ, ঠিক আছে, আমরা দেখেছি। গিরিশ, আরেকটু বলো যে ওই কন্ট্রাক্টের ব্যাপারে যেটা বলেছিলে, প্রোগ্রাম টাকা দেওয়া।
অনেক প্রোগ্রামে গেছি, হয়তো সেই প্রোগ্রামে গিয়ে আমাদের সঙ্গে হয়তো 20,000 টাকা কন্ট্রাক্ট হয়েছে, প্রোগ্রামও খুব ভালো হয়েছে, অথচ কিন্তু টাকায় কম দিচ্ছে। এগুলো আমরা কাকে বলবো, সেটার বিষয়ে আমি একটু আপনাদের কাছে একটু সাজেশন চাই।
So the context is that Girish is saying that many event organizers invite Baul Fokirs. They performed in the events, festivals, but they do not get the committed amount of money in time. And during the development of the code of ethics, Baul Fokirs actually mentioned it, and they raised the issue of signing contracts with the event organizers, so they get the committed amount on time, which is very encouraging. We are working with that. We have developed a first draft and we will discuss with the community. And already Uttam has shared the success of social media training, and they are doing social media. Interestingly, they are trying to create story kind of thing, that from whom they have learned their art, their style of artwork, and they are also using the hashtags. Actually, Uttam had social media pages for many years, but I saw that he last used his page in last year or so. So I told him, why don't you use it now? And he is getting the result. And one of the point of individual marketing is that after seeing his post, one professor from Art College Kolkata called up Uttam and said that they are requesting Uttam to organize a workshop in the Art College after the lockdown situation eases. So that is the kind of thing. And you know, they're also earning money, Potuas and also Baul Fokirs, whatever it may be. But due to lockdown, they cannot go out. So they perform in front of screen, they share it on FB, and they are earning some money. And they are also doing the heritage education through online workshop. And we have already explained how we co-created the packaging. Now, one very encouraging story shared with me by Janmejoy Chitrokar from Chorida, who Janmejoy Sutrodhar from Chorida. Janmejoy are from community who make chow mask. The masks are used for dancing show. So I will request now John Manjoy. We have done the packaging thing with both the Chow mask and Pottochitra. And I will now request John Manjoy to come and share his story. John Manjoy.
জন্মজয় তুমি বলো, আনমিউট করো। Shoham, if you can show Janmejay and Manoj. Can you see Janmejay?
I can't find him right now.
Okay, Manoj, why don't you show the packaging?
Yeah.
Momita, can you please call Janmejay?
Okay.
So this is the special packaging for the show mask. They used to make for display, because when the tourists go to their places, they usually sell this kind of small mask. So we have designed particularly for this kind of mask. This is a box where so this is the mask and this is the box. So we have designed particularly for this size. So there are other kind of box size, other kind of mask size like this. So this is for particularly for safety of this mask. So and all the informations about the Purulia mask, Purulia Chow dance, and the detail about these craft forms, Chow mask forms, are all printed on this box. So people can get all the information along with the masks and all. This is for Chow mask. So like that, we have also designed for Pottochitra also, that one can use this when they buy some gift items like a t-shirt or something, or maybe a small Pottochitra like a scroll pot, so they can easily pack with these boxes. So and textiles also, like this is a t-shirt, so when they sell it and they just so this is
জন্মজয় এসে গেছে। জন্মজয় আনমিউট করো, আনমিউট। থ্যাংক ইউ মানুষ।
আনমিউট করব তো?
হ্যাঁ, এবার বলো।
জন্মেজয় হিন্দিতে বলো। হ্যাঁ,
হিন্দি বাংলা যেটা তুমি পাচ্ছ।
আমি আমার নাম জন্মজয় সূত্রধর, আমি ছৌ মুখোশ তৈরি করি। আমি এবারে বাংলা.com থেকে যে প্যাকেজিংটা দেওয়া হয়েছিল, ওই প্যাকেজিংটাতে আমি 3খানা মুখোশ পাঠিয়েছি। ওই প্যাকিং দেখে ওরা বলেছিল, ওরা জানতে পেরেছিল যে এই মুখোশটা জিআই পেয়েছে 2010-এ। সেটা নিয়ে আমার সাথে অনেক কথা, এবং ওরা অনেক খুশি হয়েছে। বললো যে এটা কে করেছে, আমি বললি বাংলানাটক.com থেকে করেছে। এইসব ব্যাপার অনেক কথা বললো। ওরা আবার বললো যে ঠিক আছে, এই প্যাকেজিং একটু ভালোভাবে আর যেমন জিনিস যায় ওর নিয়ে অনেক কিছু কথা বললো। বলার পরে ওনারা খুব খুশি হয়েছে, আমাদের মুখোশটাও খুব ভালোভাবে গেছে। আর তাই ওরা অনেক খুশি হয়েছে, আবার বলেছে যে আমাকে আরো কিছুগুলো মুখোশ অর্ডার দেবে। হ্যালো, শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যাঁ জন্মেজয়, ঠিক আছে। থ্যাংক ইউ জন্মেজয়। So this is a very encouraging story shared by John Manjoy. As a team, we are very happy indeed. Actually, what happened that Chow mask artists used to deliver their Chow mask in the newspaper wrap. But in this lockdown, John Mainjoy delivered 3 chow masks to a customer at Chandanagar, a suburban area near Kolkata. And John Mainjoy said that after receiving the mask, the customer called him up and was very happy with the packaging. The customer got to know about the story of mask, story of community, the GI recognition of Chori the Chow mask and all. And he said that the customer is so happy that he want to, order more such masks. So we expect more such positive impact when the situation gets normal, both from the mask makers and from the Potachitra artists. And another thing is GI is already registered for Potachitra and Chow mask, but the individual registration of the artists has also started. Around 10 artists from Potua community and around 15 from mask makers, they have applied for GI registration. So these are some of the early findings that we want to share with you at this moment.
Okay, thank you. So with that, good night and namaste, and we'll be in touch.